Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about What If Season 2, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I guess because it's been a while since I've watched the first Thor movie, and obviously it's been a little while since I rewatched Ragnarok as well, but I just didn't remember the whole thing about Asgard was like, right, we got all the nine realms under our protection. Like, you kind of went around and the whole point was like they brought peace to it. I guess I didn't remember that. I know they protected the nine realms, sure, but I didn't remember they kind of put it all under their protection like that. I guess in my head, I interpreted that opening a little differently than what I was when I'm sitting here recording it. Because I think when initially I was thinking like, oh, Odin was kind of in his conquering back. He kind of was. I mean, to be fair, Hela was by his side, but now I'm like, it was for the sake of let's bring all nine realms under us, and then we'll kind of like be the benevolent gods and look after the nine realms. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of that you had the best of intentions. You could probably kind of went about it not the best way. But I don't, because I was about to say, I didn't remember them making Odin as conquering. But to be fair, maybe that's something they covered it definitely wasn't something that really came up too much in Ragnarok or even Thor 2, Dark World. But maybe it came up in Thor 1 and I just don't remember. But obviously, Hela's ambitions go beyond, just like they did before. And obviously, Odin had to lock her away, which he did. Initially, he locked her away. This time around, he ends up sending her to Earth. Basically, she's on her Thor journey. Obviously, this is Thor before Thor, because he's not even born yet. I doubt Loki's even born yet. I mean, Loki's definitely not with their... Well, I can't remember who's the oldest. Loki or Thor? I think Loki's the oldest, but maybe I'm mistaken. I actually don't remember. Either way, like, neither one of them are in the picture. She's the only child. And so, like I said, she has her Thor journey, because Thor lands in New Mexico in the MCU, but she lands in China and ends up crossing paths with Wenwu, which was kind of interesting. I knew there was a crossover, like, based on the trailer, at least the first trailer. Once again, I did not see the second trailer, but I knew there was a crossover between between Shang-Chi and Thor, but I remember there was a Hela episode, but I didn't correlate that those were the same episodes. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I thought those were like two separate episodes. I didn't realize they were the same thing, but yeah. I thought we get to, like, have more fun with Hela. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, she had, like, a lot of, like, funny banter in Ragnarok, but we get to see an even different side of her. I mean, once again, it's kind of like Thor. You got to see him kind of stripped down without his power. He was still kind of the arrogant douchebag. That was the whole point of his journey, and she's kind of the same way. I love, like, her, like, slicking her hair back, thinking it's going to do something. It's like, oh, I don't have that power anymore. And I love that, Wenwu was like, no, go ahead, get the helmet. She's like, what, really? It's like, yeah, go ahead. Because it's almost similar to what happened with Thor. Like, the fact of the matter is, they wanted to see if it'd actually do something. That's why they told Clint not to, like, fire the arrow. Which obviously me thinking that just made me immediately think of episode 3 from What If season 1. But either way, but it's like, no, like, when Wu was like, no, I'm actually interested to see, because for one, like, obviously you're not of this world, just like these rings aren't, which you also obviously still haven't gotten into that. I get why they probably didn't bother covering that either, because it's like, well, the MCU hasn't fully tackled that yet either. We kind of tiptoe in the direction of finding out more about the rings, but that hasn't been paid off yet. So, of course, the show's not really going to cover that either, but... because he liked Hela because she's very skilled. I mean, Thor could handle himself as his own, but he was a decent enough fighter, like, even without his powers. But he's definitely, Hela's got way more. She's more of a skilled fighter than Thor is. He kind of relies a lot on brute strength, you know. I don't remember him, like, being like having, like, a lot of, like, agile and like a lot of movement in the sheet. I mean, to be fair, he's bigger. She's, like, on the slender side. She's meant to be quicker and more agile, so it makes sense. But yeah, Wenwu was like, oh, kind of disappointed when she wasn't able to get the helmet, so he ends up bringing her back with him. And it's kind of embarrassing. I'm like, oh yeah, I was making this whole moment. I was like, come on, father, don't. She's like, come on, dad, don't do this. Don't kind of embarrass me. This is my moment. You know, I'm the goddess of the underworld, and you're kind of embarrassing me right now. This is my moment to kind of shine and put all these people, like, underneath me, but it didn't work out. In fact, Wenwu was, like, enthralled by her, which I thought was so interesting. Because obviously, this is, like, super far in the past. Because I'd actually forgotten until, like, we got part of the episode. I was like, all right, like, Wenwu's immortal, isn't he? I have not seen Shang-Chi since like 2021, like a little bit, like probably a little before I saw Eternals. Cause I know they came out like a couple months apart, but I saw it like right before I saw Eternals. But yeah, so I haven't seen it. I haven't rewatched it since. I haven't. I've only seen it once. So, but I completely forgot. Like, right, he is like he lives a long time, but so obviously he hasn't had Shang at this point in time. Like, and we don't know what year it is on Earth. But it's not. Well, it can't be that far in the past because of the whole Gamora and Thanos at the end, which we'll get to later on. But that kind of puts it in a certain time frame. But to be fair, that could be a thing of. I think they even implied like no, they were doing this for a while, so that could have been like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and then we kind of get, somewhere in like that 20 to 30 year range before the MCU that we know it. Maybe that's just like because I think there might have been conversations about them doing it for a long time because it is a goddess and an immortal joining forces. Like I said, we'll get to when we get that, but I just thought that was so interesting. I think that'd be an interesting dynamic if it ended up being like, oh yeah, Hela ends up being Shang's mom. That'd be kind of an interesting development in this universe. It's like, what would that mean for you? Because that would make, like in that universe, that make you, not only would you inherit the 10 rings, you'd be a demigod, wouldn't you? That'd be so interesting. I mean, also like Shang wouldn't have the same upbringing he did because his dad's not the same person in this universe like he was in the original. But either way, like it's just the interest he's shown in her. Like he has her, like she puts on this dress and he's kind of captivated. Cause she's making a whole comment about like, oh yeah, me wearing this red is actually gonna make it that much easier when I slit your throat and you bleed on me. I'm like, Jesus, Hela. Kind of almost, it's weird to say, but she's almost in her tsundere bag to some extent. Not really, but yeah, that's what comes to my mind immediately. But it's like, yeah, like when it was like, no, let's join forces together. We can basically, like in a way of like, yeah, we protect the people just like the 10 rings are supposed to. It's like we kind of go about, we reshape the world and try to do good with it. And it's like, with you by my side, we could do so much good. We could protect this world. I mean, obviously, Hela being the god she is doesn't really have much care for the human world, but ends up knocking him out and ends up taking off. But I love that he's like, bring her back to me alive. He's got a smile on his face. He's looking at it like, ooh, this is kind of a little cat mouse game. It's like, Jesus, we never really got to see this side of him. To be fair, he was a widower the moment we got introduced to him, so he was kind of resentful and angry. We never really got to know him a lot on a personal level. We never really got to know him we got some obviously pre-present day stuff with the movie, but we still never really got to explore a lot on who he was then. So he might have had a playful side like that. We just only knew the man who lost his wife that was just sad and angry and wanted to like create a perfect world, kind of like reshape the world in a better light in some degrees. But then it's like, well, to be fair, like the 10 Rings was like this criminal organization, because like they shifted away from trying to make the world a better place, right? Wasn't it just a thing of, nah, we're just doing this for like, because they're just a straight up crime organization, aren't they? I mean, it's probably especially now that Shang's like sister took over. Like I said, I'd have to rewatch Shang-Chi. It's been a minute, so I'm not remembering everything related to the 10 Rings. Not just the 10 Rings themselves, but like the organization as a whole that Wenwu ran. But she meets our little non-face butt creature that they made friends with in the movie, and she's just like, oh, I thought I was talking to your face. I didn't realize I was talking to your, but oh, okay. It wouldn't be the first ass I followed. I love that she just kept saying the word ass over and over. She's like, oh, like it's going to be your ass or your face or both. Yeah, so I just thought that was so interesting. Did a good job of getting through the woods in on a horseback, which is pretty impressive considering Shang and the others like barely got through it in a freaking car. But yeah, she ends up meeting Jaya, who is voiced by Lauren Tom, because initially I was like, why does that name sound so familiar? I've talked about her recently, because she was in a episode of My Adventures of Superman, if you've seen it. It's episode 6 or 7? It's the multiverse episode with Mr. Mixopitalik. She voiced one of the Loises. The main Lois is kind of like the leader of the Council of Loises. She voiced the main one in that regard. But the other thing I know her from, because I talked about it at the time, was if you're familiar with Supernatural, she played Kevin. Wasn't Kevin's last name Tran? Kevin from Supernatural, she played Kevin's mom in Supernatural. So just, either way. Because I heard the voice, I was like, it sounds kind of familiar, and I saw the name, I was like, why does that name sound so familiar? And I think that's why. But either way, like I said, a tangent and all that aside, it is interesting that Hela, she's like, right, she's all about, getting her revenge, because she's like, no, this is about Winwu. Oh, she's like, well, actually, this is about my father. It's actually about both of them. Oh, actually, there's also my dad's. He started dating this woman, Frigga. Not the biggest fan of her either. So it's like the three of them. I'm like, I had no idea, because that's by the time Hela was a part of the MCU story, obviously, Frigga had died in Dark World, so we never got that dynamic, and obviously we never really got a lot with Odin and Hela. So this episode kind of gives us insight into that relationship a little bit more. Because obviously, because Odin's death is what unlocks her and frees her, so that's interesting. So we kind of got interactions between them like that we never obviously got in the TV show. I mean, in the movies, but that's so interesting to know that she doesn't like Frigga because she also thinks Frigga doesn't like her, and it's like that's such an like a little funny detail of like which I mean they never really go into it, but it's like who's Hela's mom then? I don't think that was ever covered, because it was like, I guess in my head I just assumed she was Frigga's other daughter as well, but it's like, no, I guess she has a different mom. And once again, it's probably a Norse mythology thing of like, oh, this is who her mom is. I never thought about it. Like I said, I just assumed that Frigga was her mom until she was like, yeah, like, my dad's new girlfriend. Interesting. Obviously, sometimes, especially being the oldest, meeting the new lady in your dad's life, especially considering the complicated relationship she has with her dad. So Jaya is training her and all this stuff. It's like, yes, you know how to fight, but it's kind of her trying to find a new approach to everything, because she's been this sword, this weapon of her father's for so long. And that's the thing, I was this weapon and I was cast aside, and Jaya's helping her kind of find that new way of like, yes, you're a good fighter, but you need to kind of first learn how to breathe and kind of learn their ways, because it was really interesting that like we got that flashback of Odin taking Cerberus from her and it's like putting him on a chain, because it's like, hey, he needs to basically learn how to serve his master. And then we cut to showing him showing off the helmet. So the helmet was meant to be this representation of, it was supposed to be her chain, like her being this sword that he wielded. It's like from a young age your father forged you into a weapon, and the moment my ambition grew too much out of the way, out of control, now you want to kind of muzzle me in a sense. It's like, it is kind of sad that like you made me into what I am. You've defined me. She's like, without my powers, without my need to fight and try to gain power, who am I without that? And I mean, that's also like Thor, I mean, that's a part of Thor's journey of, well, who is he without his powers? And eventually, well, who is he without his hammer? Like in Ragnarok, it's like, at the end of the day, he's still the god of thunder. So Hela trying to rediscover who she is, because she's only viewed herself as the goddess of the underworld, and that's defined her and as being this warrior and fighter, and that's all she is. But it's like, you can't fight darkness with darkness, and she found light at the end of it all, which I thought was so dope. She found a new power. Obviously, like, she's in her avatar bag right now, like training wise and stuff. But at the same time, Odin found out, well, Heimdall was keeping an eye on things and couldn't find Hela, so they're like, maybe she's dead, and they start picking up on the 10 rings. So it's like, it makes you wonder, how did the 10, did we, Wenwu only recently get the 10 rings or something? Why hadn't Odin noticed them before now? I guess he had never taken a deep look at Midgard until he sent Hela there, and like, because Heimdall's the one who brought it up to his attention. So now it's like, right, we can't let something like that, something that potentially can kill a god, which is interesting. I mean, because they used the 10 rings to fight and kill that thing at the end of Shang-Chi. It's like a giant demon. I don't know if that thing would even correlate power and scale wise to like a god or not. But yeah, like the 10 rings have the power to match a god, so kind of interesting power scaling. Like I said, the thing at the end of Shang-Chi that ended up fighting, the one pretending to be Shang's mom, I don't know if that necessarily correlates as a, like I said, god tier level. It doesn't have to be like a god, but like the demon, because it's supposed to be like a devil, isn't it? And so it might be on that god tier of power level type of thing. Either way, Odin came down with his his army and challenges Wenwu and his people, and you have him and Hela joining forces together, which it kind of gives me like the one that kind of I always go back to it because like it's one of my favorite cute moments in like just a couples type of thing. It's like the Doctor and River song when they're back to back and they're kind of being super flirty even though they're in the middle of danger. It's like the looks they give each other. I'm like, wow, you two are vibing so hard. It's almost this couple and you're like, oh, that's such an interesting power couple. But yeah, they go toe to toe with Odin. And it's like, yeah, you got to get rid of Gungnir, separate from Gungnir. It's like, well, Gungnir, who's that? It's like, that's Gungnir. Oh, the good old Gungnir spear. It's actually a really dope battle, and just like once again, I like because I'm not that familiar with the Ten Rings from the comics. I know they come up in there's the Iron Man animated series from like 2009 and 2011 called was it the New Adventures of Iron Man? I can't remember what it was called. It's like a CGI animated Iron Man series that dealt with the Mandarin and the Ten Rings. That was my introduction to the Mandarin and the Ten Rings. But obviously they were actually like finger-sized rings. They were closer to like the Infinity Stone size rather than the actual like bracelets. Which I even love. There's that line from Hela being like, "Yeah, you're brave to try and match with that accessory." I'm like, I love how snarky she is. Like I said, she was in the movie too, but we got even more of that snark. In this case, it's like, to be fair, all those siblings are like that. They're smart Alex. She's probably a lot more like Loki than she is Thor, which is ironic considering like Loki's not even her blood sibling. Thor actually is. But either way, because what this fight also represented for Hela was freedom from her father. She's always, once again, been chained by her father, and she wanted freedom, and she kind of wanted that for other people too. So she's like, if my father comes here, does his thing, then we're just all going to be in servitude. And like, it's not only my freedom anymore I'm fighting for, it's everyone's freedom. Everyone kind of deserves to be free. Not kind of, does deserve to be free. So the fact of the matter is, she showed mercy at the very end, though, when like she had actually kind of they ended up besting her dad, and in that moment, she reached out a hand. It's like, right, we can stop this father here and now, and he's the one that went to start strangling her. It's like, who are you to kind of tell me, because obviously it's a pride thing too of like, who do you think you are to like look down upon me? And she ends up getting her helmet and her powers back, but it manifests differently, which is so interesting considering like nothing, I mean, other than his personality and everything, nothing really changed in Thor once he got Mjolnir back. But I guess this is supposed to be a little more reflective of, this is closer to probably like, it's an amalgamation of Thor 1 at the end and Thor Ragnarok at the end. So it's, but obviously no, like other than like him being able to channel the power, like nothing really outside of that had changed. So I think for her, it manifesting itself that way, like no longer giving into the, I mean, to be fair, that was representative of her, of like diving into the darkness, and this is her being imbued with the light, and she ultimately ends up taking her father down. And it's like, right, the throne is yours. And she's like, yeah, it's going to take maybe millennia. That's where it is. Because like there's a line of dialogue, it might take a long time to dismantle what you've built up until this point in time, but we've got to set everyone free. Like everyone deserves freedom. So yes, so that's why I was like, oh, like the timeline didn't make sense, but it's like, no, because the end of it with Thanos and stuff was like eons later. And so they went around to the different realms. Wenwu and her joined forces. Both the Asgardians and the Ten Rings joined together. Once again, very different people in this situation, and they not only like kind of protected like the universe, the different realms. They actually, as we saw, stopped Thanos from doing what he did, before he went on his journey. Like, so, I mean, to be fair, which is no, because I was about to say that he's already invaded at that point in time, but him talking to Gamora is right before he slaughters half of her people. The whole conversation, because this is before they have that conversation about balancing the knife. And so kind of changing the history in this world too. Like so many of these worlds, it's like, man, what does that mean? That means like Because that means they got to Thanos like years and years in advance. I mean, to be fair, like a couple episodes ago, Tony found out about Thanos. Granted, this is quite a bit into Thanos' reign and him doing stuff. So he's quite a bit further in his journey than this was him, once again, like 20, 30-ish years ago or something like that. So very, very interesting. And like I said, a very, very different dynamic of heroes to have kind of being like the protectors of this universe out and about. You know, and two massive armies like that, the Asgardians and the Tenrai. Also, hope we get to see. Oh, I was about to say, like, they definitely did it in Shang-Chi, but seeing it done in space is sick as hell. Him running on the rings and making that his way. I'm like, we better see Shang-Chi do that. Like, he has to be a part of, like, Battle World and Secret Wars. He better do something like that. We better see him, like, traveling through space on those rings and walking on them or something. Because, like, that's insane. I'm sure, like, there's also they were probably using a Bifrost, so he was able to kind of use. But, like, come on, dude. Because I just remembered, I was like, right, they do use that. Like, him and his dad both used the rings like that. I was like, man, I need to rewatch Shang-Chi. I really liked it. I just haven't rewatched. Like, to anyone who's curious, the last movie I rewatched was Ant-Man and the Wasp, I think was the last, and that was a couple years ago. It was like the last MCU movie I've rewatched. So I need to kind of pick up my rewatch at some point in time, especially for the more recent stuff I've only seen once. But either way, very, very interesting dynamic and circumstances. And once again, it changes the universe a lot, knowing like you got this powerhouse out there protecting the universe, but also, you know, Thanos kind of being stopped in his path before he even advances too far into his career. Like I said, this is like 20, 30-ish years ago. So just something kind of very interesting to think about, like how, once again, the in the long run, how differently these universes are going to be shaped. I mean, what does this mean for Thor and Loki? You know, in the grand scheme of things, will Loki necessarily be this? I mean, will this be another universe where he was returned to the ice giants? Will he stay being the trickster? I mean, what will having a sister like Hela, her in there, because the difference is she'll be in their lives. They grew up without Hela, so having her and her being who she is, how would that shape Thor? But also Loki being the trickster that he is, like he having a positive influence like her. I mean, to be fair, your mom and dad weren't enough to keep you in line from being the power obsessed trickster that you were. So, I don't know. It's interesting stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to know what that whole Odinson dynamic is like in general. And once again, they get to be like a full family, whereas they never had that opportunity before. I mean, for all we know, Frigga and Hela could be in a very different spot later on. It's like, I like you, stepmom type of situation. So I don't know. Just funny thing to think about. But yeah, I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us. Only 2 episodes left, so some of these threads we've set up, I guess, will be culminating. To be fair, we didn't get the full culmination until episode 9 last season, but maybe episode 8 will kind of set up the culmination. Or I'm curious to see how this all plays out, because we've gotten 2 loose threads, one from episode 5, one from episode 6. So how that plays out, where that takes us going forward, I'm excited to see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good